Disrupting Japan, Episode 6. Welcome to Disrupting Japan, straight talk from Japan's most successful entrepreneurs. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for joining me. Today we sit down with Tadashi Tanimoto of Realcom, a knowledge management platform that he founded in the depths of the 2000 dot-com bust, and that he grew steadily until he IPO'd it in 2007. Tadashi now devotes a lot of his time to his new firm 10X, which focuses not only as his personal investment arm, but also educating and mentoring Japan's up-and-coming generation of entrepreneurs. Now, Tadashi has been deeply focused on changing the way people and groups interact with each other and share information. And that's something that, I grant you, sounds like thousands of mission statements from so many companies around the world. But he really walks his talk, and that'll be obvious as the interview progresses. We'll talk not only about the importance and methodology behind effective information sharing, but we'll talk about the key differences in the way people communicate in San Francisco and Tokyo, a bit about what's driving the recent spike in M&A activity here in Japan, and why international experience is really important for any startup founder, even if they think they only want to be focused on the domestic market, and about why American companies actually make better customers for startups. It's really a fascinating interview, and I think you'll enjoy it. So here we go. We're sitting here with Tadashi Tanimoto of Realcom and 10X. And Realcom in Japan is by far the leading knowledge management solution here. You've got more than 150 really large Japanese customers using it. And before we get started, can you tell me a little bit about what Realcom does, what knowledge management is, and what it means in Japan?
By knowledge management, what I try to achieve is to create the knowledge community within or across the organization. Maybe the easiest way to imagine what we do is you can say our software as a Facebook for intranet.
Okay.
Yes. So it was when we say knowledge, sometimes people just talking about text, about search, but I'm more interested in the interaction between people.
So your solution, so knowledge management is, in the academic sense, it's very rigorous computer science approach. Japanese companies' executives are famously difficult to try to get them to define exactly what they need and exactly what the requirements are. Mm-hmm. So how did you take this very academic knowledge management approach and make it work in Japanese companies where requirements are so gray and so vague?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very interesting point. So in our selling process to the, say, corporate executives, we always get that kind of question. In other words, we try to first convince those people about the real benefit of the knowledge management. Then, if those people are interested, we will explain how to make it. But still, when I say knowledge community, that is, in a way, change the employees' behavior in terms of sharing information or communication or sharing knowledge. So
how does it change it? In what ways did...
What we are trying to provide is not a software, but a tool to change the culture of the organization. So it's very difficult to prove how you can change the culture. So now we will start with a trial project. Maybe pick one small organization, say 50 people or 100 people, who could be the first user for that system. And then maybe we try 3 to 6 months with our consulting help. And then, seeing is believing. If you or management of the company see some good result, they are excited and try to expand that knowledge management into the entire organization.
So have you had some big successes? Are these companies actually, are employees actually being more willing to share information internally? Is it working?
Yes, I think, in many cases, or most of the cases, we will see a very good success. For example, one of our clients is construction management consulting company, analyzing some structure of the soil or some simulation if the earthquakes happened and what kind of architecture should be applied at the specific land, that kind of thing. So that kind of consulting firm was regarded as just a group of independent consultants, not as a team of people.
Okay.
So everybody has a very high skill and actually doesn't think he needs to share any knowledge or information with other consultants because he thinks he knows everything.
Right.
And sometimes, by sharing the knowledge is losing your the competency within the organization.
Right.
So the vice president did not believe that is happening in their organization, but the president believed it would be something that could be happening. And then we set up that software and try to make some knowledge sharing community across the region. Interesting thing was, it was, I forgot about 8 or 9 years ago. Unfortunately or fortunately, we had earthquake in Hokkaido. Not the big one.
Okay.
Before then, we had a big earthquake in Hokkaido, and 4 or 5 months later, we got another earthquake in Ishikawa area, Niigata area. They did a trial to share the knowledge they got in the Hokkaido earthquake to apply to the Niigata earthquake. And then that did work very, very well.
Really?
And that changed everybody's thinking. When we apply the system, everybody was skeptical. But after even a small success, they think, this could be working for us.
So was it the disaster making people want to pull together for one time, or is this an ongoing behavior that from now on people are becoming more cooperative and sharing information?
Yeah, so once they believe in the benefit of that kind of sharing,
they keep doing it. That's fantastic. It's incredibly ambitious. I mean, you are fighting against a very deep-rooted Japanese business culture,
which
is not really open to sharing. Do you see that changing inside Japanese culture as a whole? Are people becoming, or Japanese companies becoming more open to sharing information and working across divisions?
Okay, honestly speaking, you just said that we have about 150 customers, and not necessarily all 150 is a success case.
Okay.
We have some failure case, of course. I think the most critical success factor is a leadership of the top management.
Okay.
And then, because that kind of knowledge sharing will never happen if the middle management will be cooperative. Because especially, I think that will be happening in a large organization.
I think that's a really interesting point, because if you look at a lot of data analytics programs, if you look at a lot of the more modern sort of gamification, a lot of them provide value for the C-level, the top leadership, but the people who have to do the work and have to really share don't see benefits from it, so they don't tend to succeed. What is Realcom doing differently to get that buy-in from middle managers?
That's an interesting point. Specifically speaking, but through knowledge management, of course, C-level will get a benefit, and also the people in the bottom of the organization. The people who are skeptical or try to avoid or disturb that kind of community is middle management. Because in many cases, their job is just transfer the information from your guys to your boss.
So they can't be just a gatekeeper anymore.
Right. So
they have to add value. I see.
So in other words, through that system, top management get real information from the people.
And the experts and workers get recognition for being experts and workers. I see.
And you can easily find out the middle management who does not add value on those activities.
Well, I can see why middle management would not be too happy about that.
Right.
That's really that makes a whole lot of sense. Mm-hmm. But listen, one thing I have to ask you, you started Realcom in 2000, right? So it sounds like you were starting a company with a very, very difficult goal of trying to make transparency, introduce transparency into Japanese organizations. Mm-hmm. You were starting at one of the most difficult times to start a company, right in the middle of the dot-com crash.
Right.
Most startups at that time were falling over like crazy.
Right.
So what did you do to keep the company going, to make a success in such a difficult time with such a difficult product?
Actually, we did not have a very difficult time to promote that concept.
Okay.
I think the concept itself was very, very attractive at that time to Japanese companies.
Huh.
And then let me say back to the origin of my idea. Why
Please, that's great.
Come up with that idea. Actually, before starting Realcom, I spent 6 years in the Silicon Valley doing a consulting, matchmakers between startup companies in Silicon Valley and large corporations in Japan and Eastern Asia companies.
Okay.
Introduce new technology, Silicon Valley's new technology to large corporations, and then in return for that, those startup companies might get a capital investment or some subsidization for the product or technology development.
Right.
That is what I did. And then I was very attracted by the dynamism or culture of Silicon Valley itself.
Okay. What aspects of it? What part of it?
For example, there are many kind of gathering event in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Formal or informal. What I found interesting was when you meet with somebody, you introduce, of course, yourself and maybe exchange business card. And in many cases, you get somebody from the Oracle or Intel or kind of large corporations.
Right.
What they talk is, okay, I understand you're an Intel guy, but what is your goal for your life, or what are you interested, or what you can do? That kind of a communication.
So just very open and frank and personal.
Personal.
Yeah.
So there, it's kind of too extreme to say, but nobody care about what company you are working for, but everybody care about what you like to do or what you can do.
Well, I think I think that makes sense, especially in America, where people don't tend to work for the same company that long.
Right.
Particularly compared to Japan.
Right. So through those kind of communication or gathering, as you know, the many new projects start, and some of those projects becomes ventures and get an investment, and then ended up with a huge company like a Google. So that kind of a dynamism, I was very interested. So that time I think, maybe if Japanese companies get that kind of dynamism within the organization, Japanese companies would be much, much stronger, and Japanese economy would be much, much better. That's what I thought. And then I started thinking about, to make that happen, what you need. Through that kind of process, I came up with the idea. And interestingly, at that time, I did not care about market size or growth potential, that kind of thing. I just thinking about if this idea could be my life work or not.
Compared to 15 years ago, compared to 2000, there are a lot more networking events here in Japan where founders can meet each other, where large company businessmen can meet small company founders. Do you think it's similar to what you saw in Silicon Valley, to what inspired you in Silicon Valley 15 years ago? Or does Japan still have to make a lot of improvements?
Okay, so quick answer is we need more improvement.
Okay.
And some of that is we just need more time, more history to be like a Silicon Valley.
So we need more time, but more time to do what? What needs to be fixed?
Okay, two things. One is From the industry point of view, of course, you need more serial entrepreneurs or good venture capitalists who used to be a good entrepreneur, or venture capitalist who experienced a couple of like hype and
so
bubble
some
crash.
ups and downs.
Ups and downs, which means that you need 10 or 20 years at least of the experience to experience that kind of thing. That is one thing. And the other thing is education or thinking process.
So education of young entrepreneurs, of new founders?
Or if I may, I'd like to go back to the elementary school to change entire education.
Oh, no, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
How would you change it?
As you know, Japan's education system, if you can say in a simplified way, is to memorize the correct answer, which is written on a whiteboard or which is written in a textbook.
Yeah, it is very memorization, black and white, right and wrong.
And then, so the good student in Japanese means good student who is good at memorize the things or to give you the answer you are supposed to answer, rather than create new ideas or some interesting idea, which is not necessarily a good idea or excellent idea, but some interesting or funny idea could stimulate the team to think about the new stuff. But that kind of a thing is not thought as a good studentship.
Right. That's a big change, though.
Exactly. Almost like a
180-degree turn.
180-degree turn,
But you're working now with a lot of you're working now with new founders and new startups as well, aren't you?
Right. Yes.
That's part of what the 10X is, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you want to talk a bit about 10X? Because I've heard really fascinating things about what you're doing.
Okay. So 10X is still my private company. I no employee. I'm doing everything just by myself. And what 10X does is one thing is angel investment.
Right.
And the other thing is a kind of a consulting to helping the startups or helping large corporations to do a new startups, like a carve-out ventures.
So for the large corporations, do you mean helping them to invest in startups or to help them to work with startups?
Help them to work with startups or to start a new project within their organization.
That must be really challenging.
Yeah, that must be really challenging, but that's a good point. So, say the president or top-level management of those large corporations believes they have some good assets, people or knowledge or patent or technology, something which should be good to be a new venture, like a spin-out venture.
Oh, okay.
But somehow culture prohibits the employee to do that kind of thing, and then
the classic innovator's dilemma.
Right.
So they can't spin out a little tiny business.
Right.
So do you think large companies in Japan are becoming more willing to work with startups?
Yes. Mm-hmm. That's definitely yes.
That's a great thing. So what do you think changed? Why are these big Japanese companies suddenly willing to work with startups? Where 10 years ago it was very different.
Right.
What changed?
Those large corporations cannot develop very good growth story or growth strategy by themselves.
Do you think we're going to be seeing more M&A activity in Japan? Do you think large companies will look to buying startups as a way to accelerate their growth?
Yes, I think so.
Traditionally, large Japanese companies haven't bought little startups.
Right.
But you think that's changing now?
Yes, that's changing. I think one of the reasons why, say, in 10 years ago, 15 years ago, large corporations were not willing to partner with startups or buying startups is, I think, an employment issue. In other words, the Japanese people in the large Japanese companies tend to think about how to secure the job for your employee before thinking about innovation, before thinking about growth.
Okay.
So buying some company, say, with 100 employees, people say, okay, instead of increasing number of employees by 100, you can use our guy and pick 100 employee and do something like that venture.
And that never works very well.
That never works. So I don't know, it's a fortunate thing or unfortunate thing, but for the large corporations today, they cannot afford to keep all of the employees.
Okay.
So you need to abandon people with low performance.
So Japanese companies in general are being more comfortable with firing staff when they're not needed?
I should not say, I don't think that we should say more comfortable, but they have no choice. So 15 years ago, still it should be better to fire some people and utilize some resources outside of that company. But that time, still they couldn't make that kind of a big movement. But today, they have no choice.
So they're being forced into it.
Right.
Well, that makes sense. Change is good for startups.
Right.
Any kind of change. So.
Any kind of change is good. One more thing I'd like to see, actually, is a better open market for the talents.
So the ability for people to change jobs more freely?
Yes.
Is the problem there's a shortage of talented people in Japan, or is the problem that people are unwilling to change jobs, or that companies are unwilling to hire from other companies?
Okay. It's more like a culture issue. Mm-hmm. But even today, for example, if executive vice president of Mitsubishi Corporation goes to the chairman of the startup company,
right?
Like Eric Schmidt went to the Google at that time. If that happens in Japan today, that person might make some mistake and screwed up and then expelled by the organization.
So society would see it as a failure.
Failure.
Not as a new adventure.
Yeah, right. Still that happens. That is many people's mentality. So that ended up with the movement of the talent.
I see. So the biggest need for talent is more on the executive level, the people with business experience, not so much the engineers and the younger crowd.
Oh, that's a good point. So engineer is another issue. But from the venture's point of view, entrepreneur's point of view, we need more mentors, very good mentors. Like, for example, back to the Google case, I don't think Larry Sergey could be successful without Eric Schmidt or John Doerr, those kind of people. Right. But for example, Horiemon.
Right.
What if he has a very, very good mentor who can control?
Well, I guess that goes back to what you were saying before. It really is just Japan needs more time. So America's been through 3 or 4 generations of successful entrepreneurs who invested in the next generation. Right. And I think Japan, I guess people like you are really the first generation to invest in the next one. Right.
But still, people in a large corporation, we need those guys. Like, again, back to the Google case. Right. I don't think when Eric Schmidt made a decision to join Google, of course he was not 100% sure if that company will be successful. But I think he was 200% sure that there is no career risk for him.
Right.
Even if
he failed.
If he failed, people say, you had a very good, you accumulated the experience, right?
Well, this brings up another point that it's a lot of people talk about that Japan, the fear of failure and the price of failure in Japan is very, very high. Mm-hmm. Is that something you see changing now?
A little bit.
Slowly?
Slowly. At least everybody starts saying that we have to make mistake instead of making no mistake, no challenge. But still in the bottom of your heart,
they don't really believe it.
They don't. Nobody wants to make a mistake.
Yeah. It seems to me that if you talk to young graduates, engineers, they seem to be a little more okay with failure because they can recover.
Right.
But I think the people that you're talking about, the potential mentors, the successful businessmen, are still very afraid of looking like they fail. Mm-hmm. But is there hope that we'll see that change in the future? Or do we have to wait for another generation?
I think it's a change, but still we need to wait for that.
Yeah?
Another generation, yes.
You still spend a lot of time in Silicon Valley, right?
Yes. Not very often these days, but yeah, of course, yes.
Because a lot of our listeners are outside of Japan.
Right.
So what do you think that foreigners most often misunderstand about Japanese startups?
Talking about startups, actually, I don't know if they have any information or knowledge on the startups in Japan.
Okay. Well, we're trying to fix that.
Yeah, we're trying to fix that. So, for example, actually, it's about large startups like Rakuten or Gree or, say, DNA start buying some startups or ventures in the United States.
True. I don't think we can call Rakuten a startup anymore. If you own a baseball team, you can't be a startup.
Okay. Yeah, that's
I think we can agree to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Actually, DNA owns a baseball team too, don't they? Okay, so they're not startups.
Too. Yeah. Right. Again, I guess my answer was, I did not have experience of American or foreign people having a misperception of entrepreneurs in Japan. It's before having a misperception. I mean, they don't know.
So it's just complete lack of information.
Lack of information. They don't know.
They don't know enough to misunderstand.
Right. Yeah, that's a point.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Japan shouldn't just copy Silicon Valley. That won't work because it's unique. The culture's different. What do you think are some of the strengths and weaknesses of Japanese entrepreneurs? What are they good at? What are they weak at?
I think, especially talking about the younger generation, like 20s, they are much more flexible in thinking, which is as good level as the people in the United States. Those guys are very innovative, as innovative as the people in the United States. But the Japanese guy could be better to make the good idea into some operations.
So they need to work on execution?
Yeah, better on execution, I think.
Well, I guess that goes back to what you were saying before about the need for education and mentoring.
Right.
Because that's the way to fix it.
Yes.
Okay.
And also the weakness, another weakness is, again, the English. I'm not just talking about the language, but kind of a global mind, borderless mind, I mean.
But I have to say that I've been very surprised, and a lot of people who come to Japan from America and Europe are surprised at how many Japanese founders do speak English.
Right.
Especially after a couple of beers.
Right. Yeah, that's a point. So it's a part of language issue, but it's more on the culture issue.
Okay.
So because, for example, with the Realcom, I set it up the Silicon Valley office in 2006 or something, and I brought 3 engineers from Japan to the Silicon Valley office. And one guy is a very talented engineer, but speaking not very good English. Mm-hmm. And the other guy speaks very, very fluent English because he spent 6 or 8 years when he was like an elementary school student or junior high school student. So he is almost like a native speaker. And the other last guy is kind of an adventurous guy and who cannot speak very good English, like as just average level. And then what happened at the end of the day is that guy, adventurous guy, became most successful.
Just because he was trying different things?
Yeah, so actually, of course, he tried very hard to be a part of Silicon Valley, but attended that kind of parties or gathering event and trying to expand his friend network.
Right.
And then still, his English was not very good, but everybody tried to understand him. And instead, that kind of a almost native speaker guy is too shy to join the community.
It's funny you say that. I think, because my Japanese, even after 20 years, is still not fluent. Mm-hmm. But I think you're right. The key is just getting in there and trying. And people are very friendly and open if you're trying.
Right.
That's probably universal.
Yes.
In the States, Japan, wherever. Well, actually, recently, a lot of Japanese new companies are moving to San Francisco to get funding. What kind of companies do you think that's a good idea for what kind of companies do you think it's a bad idea to move to Silicon Valley?
Yeah, of course, we see many cases of Japanese startups expand their business into the United States. But in most cases, I don't see the value for that, honestly speaking. We see many cases try to expand the operation globally, but I don't see many cases of changing their operation or changing their strategy to fit in a global market.
I want to talk a bit more about that. So for Japanese companies who say, okay, now it's time to go global, what do they have to change? What mistakes do they usually make?
In ITs, not automotives.
Right.
But in ITs, you should start designing of the company or a product or business model, not in Japan, but in the United States.
Really?
Or English-speaking countries.
Why is that?
I guess two things. One is a culture is a little bit different. So Japan's culture is not so universal. So it's better to adapt American idea into the other countries. That is one thing. The other thing is maybe the same reason. Back to the Realcom. We develop a software, enterprise software, and the requirement is very high. And also I have some U.S. large corporations as a customer.
Right.
Like Boeing, P&G, very large corporations.
Yeah.
But they understand they are dealing with a new software. They understand those products has bugs.
So the American customer is more forgiving than the Japanese customers?
In a sense, yes.
Okay.
In other words, those people, U.S. customers can appreciate new technologies. They understand.
Oh, I see.
They have some problem, but and of course that should be fixed. But simultaneously, they see the value. But Japanese large corporations tend to point out just about the problem. So that's why startups we had a very hard time to compete with large corporations like Fujitsu or NEC.
So would your American customers give you better feedback about what could be improved and what they liked than your Japanese?
Yes.
Interesting.
And try to nurture that company itself.
Where the Japanese customers were trying to have a more standard vendor-customer relationship.
Right. So, for example, you have to be as good as IBM in terms of quality assurance. I try to be, but
it'll take us a while.
Right. Something like that.
All right. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. So that's why I said maybe it's better. It's advantageous if you have a very good talent and if you have a good idea. It's advantageous for you to be in the United States.
Then let me ask you this, because I know you're working with a lot of new founders.
Right.
And what is the most important advice you can give to young Japanese who want to start a company now?
In general, when you read a textbook for, say, startups or to get a funding, maybe it says what is a market potential or growth potential,
right.
What is a competitive advantage or that kind of thing. But that is not the essential question you have to answer. I think the essential question you have to answer is why you have to do this business. Well, why you?
So not what, but why?
Why you? In other words, I think the successful entrepreneur, the successful venture business has a very convincing story. And it is almost as identical as the founder's personal history or belief or dream. So even if some market, say social game, is in a boom and still many places to have get money, but if you are not believing in a game, you should never do that kind of business.
So to do something you're passionate about, that you have a reason to do.
So, yeah. So try to find out why you are here, and how you use your life for the benefit of other people. If you are successful for these two, getting a funding or getting a good employee or partner is much, much easier. That's my belief.
That's great. Listen, this has been fantastic. Is there anything you want to talk about?
Again, for the Japanese entrepreneurs, I think first you have to go somewhere. I don't necessarily say Silicon Valley. If you are thinking about Asian business,
to get out of Japan?
Yeah, go out of Japan.
Why is that? Just a different way of thinking, a different perspective?
Yes, to get a different perspective and actually to better understand Japan.
Ah, okay.
So
you'll have a reference.
And sometimes it's better for you to understand something, not from the inside, but from the outside.
Well, and I guess that gets back to what you're saying, your whole inspiration for your company and your vision of changing how Japanese corporations communicate and share knowledge came from your perspective looking from outside.
Right.
Back into Japanese society. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Listen, thank you so much for sitting down with me. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, same here. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Okay, we're back. Hey, if you want to see the links and the resources that we talked about during the interview, or if you want to get in touch with Tanimoto-san on social media, please check out the links section of the post. And as always, the complete text of the interview will be available in the first comment on the post. And you can access either of those at disruptingjapan.com/show6. So please let us know what you think. If you want to get in touch with us or have ideas about how we can improve the show, please send me an email anytime you feel like it at feedback@disruptingjapan.com. And if you like what we're doing and you want to help us get the word out, please leave a review for us on iTunes. It's really the best way you can support the show. This is Tim Romero, and thanks for listening.